Parents are basically ATMs, aren't they? When the money's gone, they're useless. That might sound like a joke, but the person who said those words was my own daughter. She said it to me, her mother, who had sent money every single month for 12 years without ever missing a single payment. On that day, I, Evelyn Miller, at 76 years old, came to a sudden, chilling realization. I realized that there are wounds in this world that don't bleed, but they can. Leave your heart cold for the rest of your life. And from that day on, I quietly took a step back. I didn't blame her. I didn't demand anything in return. I just gently stepped away. It wasn't an act of revenge, and it wasn't a moment of surrender. It was simply a question. A question for my daughter. And perhaps a question for all of us. A mother's love is not a bank account, and affection is not something that can be delivered by a monthly wire transfer. My name is Evelyn Miller. I am 76 years old. If I had to describe my entire life in a single word, I suppose that word would be endurance. And I believe that is the very reason I am still here today, able to tell this story. I was born and raised in a poor farming family deep in the mountains of rural Pennsylvania. As the youngest of 5 children, I never once imagined that my life would extend beyond those snow-covered peaks, beyond the fields of withered grass that swayed in the winds at the end of autumn. But fate, like a sudden gust of wind, carried me to New York City when I was in my early 20s. I came to the city with such a small and simple dream. I just want to have enough to eat, decent clothes to wear, and maybe, if I'm lucky, a quiet, warm place to call home. I met my husband at the hospital where I worked. I was a nurse, and he was an ambulance driver. There was no grand proposal, no getting down on one knee. One morning, in the quiet hospital hallway after a long night shift, he just turned to me and said, "Hey, you ever get so tired you just wish you had someone to lean on?" I just quietly nodded. Our married life was never easy, but we loved each other deeply and always supported one another. And then, when I was 34 years old, our daughter was born, our first and our only child. At that moment, holding her in my arms, I thought from the bottom of my heart, "Oh, I finally have a real family." But not long after that, life presented me with a trial I could never have imagined. When I was 42, my husband was killed in a traffic accident. He was in the middle of transporting a patient when a truck, speeding recklessly, crossed into his lane and hit the ambulance head-on. People called it a heroic sacrifice, said he died in the line of duty. But for me, only one reality remained. An 8-year-old daughter, a $40,000 loan we had taken out to open the auto repair shop he had always dreamed of, and the cold, hard fact of being a widow. No one came to help us. Not our relatives, not our friends. I silently signed the papers, taking on the full responsibility for the debt. That was the day my promise to live not just as a mother, but as a father too, truly began. I kept my job as a nurse. I worked almost exclusively night shifts, and my take-home pay was only about $2,200 a month. Rent, food, school expenses. The weight of it all fell squarely on my shoulders. There were months when I survived on little more than toast and margarine. There were days when I went to work running on only 2 hours of sleep. But through it all, I never once complained. As long as my daughter could eat properly and get a good education, I didn't care if I grew thin or old before my time. When my daughter started middle school, I began putting $800 away every month into a separate savings account in my name. It was for her future, for college. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't take vacations. I never once ate at a restaurant. I kept that up for 6 long years. And then came the day my daughter was accepted into Columbia University. I wept like a child. My daughter hugged me, tears streaming down her own face, and said, "Mom, I'm going to work so hard. I promise you." On the day she left for college, I went with her to the Port Authority bus terminal to see her off. Her suitcase was packed with heavy textbooks and cheap instant noodles. As I watched her walk toward the bus, I just kept waving, trying my best to hold back the tears that were burning in my eyes. It was a bitterly cold day. but my heart was on fire. I felt so warm, so full of hope. If this child can live a happy life, I thought to myself, then I have no regrets, even if I work myself into an early grave. That was 12 years ago. My daughter graduated from college and is now a working adult. But to this day, I continue to deposit $800 into her account every month. I've never once asked her how she's living or what she uses the money for. My only thought is, I hope it's enough. I never wanted her to worry about me. I have always believed that a mother is the last line of defense, a final refuge. I wanted to be the place she could always come back to, whether she was feeling down or hurt, or even if she just wanted a warm, home-cooked meal. Some people have told me I'm too soft. I've even been laughed at, told I was being a fool, but I would just offer a quiet smile. A mother's love isn't about getting paid back or keeping things even. I didn't give to her so that she would give back to me. I only hoped that someday, when I was truly old and weak, my daughter would remember me as the mother who gave her everything she had. But sometimes, kindness is like a shadow. It can be right beside you your whole life, and yet go completely unnoticed. And I never knew that my monthly support was slowly, imperceptibly, turning me into something transparent. Not a mother, not family, just an ATM. It was February. The New York winter still had its cold grip on the city. I remember it was a quiet morning at the beginning of the month. The window panes were beaded with a fine mist, like a quiet accumulation of dust from the passage of time. I was sitting in the corner of my small apartment, holding my old, simple cell phone in both hands, when a question that had been buried deep inside my heart for years finally surfaced. I dialed my daughter's number. After a few rings, she picked up, and I heard her voice. It sounded a little rushed, a little tired, or perhaps like she was deliberately putting on that tone. "Mom, what's up? I'm a little busy right now." I paused for a moment before asking quietly, "I was just wondering, do you still need me to send the money for your living expenses? I heard you were working now." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Through the phone, I thought I could hear the faint sound of a sigh. Yeah, just keep sending it like always. I'm so stressed out right now, and I just don't want to have to think about money." It was a vague, non-committal answer. There was no word of thanks, no hint of concern for my own well-being. I was at a loss for words. After I hung up the phone, I opened the small notebook I keep on my table. Inside, I've kept a detailed record of every transfer I've ever sent her. Just last month, my hours at the hospital had been cut and my Social Security check was late. But even so, I had dipped into my emergency savings to make sure I sent her the usual $800 right on time. I started asking myself a question. Is it possible that she's still in real trouble? Or have I just become a nuisance? That afternoon, I fell into my usual routine. I opened my iPad to read the news and check social media. I'm not what you'd call tech-savvy, but I know enough to quietly keep an eye on my daughter, Sarah. And that's when a sight flashed across the screen that made me catch my breath. It was a single photograph, and in it, unmistakably, was Sarah. She was standing in front of a bar, bathed in the glow of bright, glamorous lights, holding hands with a young man. The caption underneath it read, "Staycation at a 5-star hotel in the city. Weekend refresh with my man Mia." My finger trembled as I tapped, "See more." A series of photos scrolled by. A luxurious hotel suite, a fancy dinner with wine glasses clinking, a relaxing afternoon at the spa. And then, another caption. "Being loved is a privilege, not a duty." A real life. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was this the same daughter who had once called me, begging for just an extra $100 for my dorm fees? Was this the same girl who had cried on the phone telling me, "Mom, I could never make it in New York without you"? I felt something deep inside my chest begin to crumble with a low, grinding sound. It wasn't anger. It was the sound of the trust I had placed in her starting to crack. And yet, I still sent the money. That month, I went to the bank just like I always did. I filled out the deposit slip, signed my name, and transferred the funds. I tried to reason with myself. It's probably just for show, for her social media page, I thought. Maybe that young man paid for everything. Or perhaps it was an early birthday present from someone. I wanted so desperately to believe that. But a crack, once formed, can never be completely undone. From that day on, I started paying closer attention to my daughter's posts, and I began to see words that I hadn't noticed before. You don't have to rely on anyone as long as you have enough money to live a fun life. If you're going to call yourself family, you should actually back it up with support. It's so presumptuous to expect things from people just because you share the same blood. Every one of those sentences felt like a sharp jab to my heart. I started to wonder, could it be that I'm just being used? Was I the one who was wrong? But at the same time, a wave of self-blame washed over me. Perhaps I had made her so accustomed to receiving that I had failed to teach her how to be grateful. Maybe I was the reason she never learned to say thank you. I couldn't sleep after that. The questions just kept repeating in my head over and over, like a sad, endless melody. I wanted to ask my daughter about it, but I was afraid. What if she reacted like she did on the phone? What if she thought I was just being a bother? So, I wrote in my journal instead. Sarah, if you really, truly needed this money, your mother wouldn't hesitate. But if I'm just an ATM to you, then I'm tired. So tired. I don't expect anything in return. But just, as a human being, I just want to be treated like your mother. But I didn't send that letter. I just folded it carefully and put it away in an old wooden box right next to that faded photograph of the two of us, standing side by side at the Port Authority bus terminal. I still haven't done anything, but deep inside my heart, a seed has clearly been planted. A small, tiny seed of doubt. And it was slowly, but surely, beginning to change the way I saw the world. It was the end of March. On the quiet suburban street where I live, the first winds of spring were finally beginning to blow. The little potted plants I'd set out just after the new year were finally starting to show pale green buds. After so many days of a heart troubled by doubt and confusion, I felt myself soften. Just a little. I still hadn't done anything. I kept sending the money, just like before. I kept telling myself, you mustn't overthink this. And yet, the fabric of trust inside me felt like a piece of cloth that had been left in a damp, dark place for too long. It was slowly beginning to mildew, to fray at the edges, to decay. That morning, the sun was shining for the first time in days. I had woken up earlier than usual, made myself some oatmeal, and was starting to prepare my lunch for the day. But as I reached up to grab a pot from the top shelf, the world suddenly tilted on its axis, and everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the kitchen floor. My head was throbbing, my arm was numb, and I couldn't move my legs. It took me nearly 30 minutes to drag myself to the phone and call for an ambulance. The diagnosis was a bruised shoulder and a sprained ankle. The doctor told me, you need to stay off your feet for at least a week. Absolutely no walking. And just like that, I was admitted to the hospital. Lying there in the hospital bed, I thought to myself, Sarah will come. I know she will. I sent her a short text message. Hi, honey. Your mom had a fall in the kitchen, and I'm in the hospital. I'm at St. Mark's Hospital nearby. If you get a chance, please stop by and see me. There was no reply. The next day, I tried calling her. After several rings, she finally picked up. But the voice that answered was cold and prickly, like ice. So, what do you want? I'm in the middle of a meeting right now. I'm busy. Can you just stop calling me? Mom, you're getting older now. I can't be expected to look after you every 5 minutes. I was speechless. Not a single word about visiting me. Not one question about how I was feeling. Just those dismissive words, pushing me further and further out of her world. After she hung up, I just sat there, clutching my phone in my trembling hand, unable to make a sound. The curtains on the hospital room window billowed in the breeze, but all I could feel was a cold, empty draft blowing through my heart. That night, unable to sleep, I took out my old iPad and connected to the hospital's Wi-Fi, just to pass the time. I had originally intended to watch some cooking videos, just to take my mind off things. But before I knew it, I had done what I always did. I had opened up my daughter's social media account, and that's when I saw it. A video, posted just an hour before. The moment I read the title, I felt like I had been punched in the chest. How to get money from your parents without feeling guilty. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was from the TikTok channel my daughter ran, a channel where she posted content about her theme, living a free life, without being tied down. I played the video. My daughter appeared on the screen, wearing heavy makeup, and began to speak in a playful, almost mocking tone. Honestly, she began, if you just get the hang of it, getting money from your parents is a piece of cake. All you have to do is say stuff like, things are still so unstable for me, or my stress level is through the roof, or I'm just so worried about making it in New York. If you say that, they just send the money without you even having to ask. And then she laughed. It was a laugh I knew so well. It sounded a little like the sweet, innocent laugh she used to have as a little girl, the one she made that time she spilled her milk and looked up at me to say she was sorry. But this laugh was different. It was cold and bitter and cruel. It sounded like the voice of a complete stranger. And the words that followed, they left me completely frozen. You know, she said, I call my mom the ATM. Cool, if she has money, I'll love her. When the money runs out, I block her. It's as simple as that. I don't remember how long I remained there, completely motionless. No tears came. No anger welled up inside me. There was only a gaping hole that had been torn open in my chest, as if someone had reached inside and pulled out my heart, leaving behind nothing but a cold, deep, bottomless void. That was all that was left. And then, I remembered. I remembered when she was in kindergarten. All those days I spent clipping coupons from the newspaper so I could buy the cheaper vegetables at the grocery store. I remembered the day she was accepted into college. How I stood in line at the bank for hours to wire the money for her first semester's tuition. I remembered the night she had a high fever and couldn't sleep. Mommy, I'm scared to be alone. She had whispered into the phone, and with just those words, I left my shift early and rushed home to be by her side. And still, after all of that, I was now being called the ATM. Lying there, staring up at the ceiling of the hospital room, the sterile white glare of the fluorescent light stung my eyes. In my entire life, I had never truly held a grudge against anyone. If you live an honest life, you will be rewarded one day. That was the simple belief I had carried with me, the principle I had lived by. But perhaps the world isn't built on such simple truths. I don't blame my daughter. The person I blame is myself, for believing too much, for expecting too much, for enduring too much. That night, I didn't sleep for a single minute. I no longer felt the ache in my shoulder or the throbbing pain in my ankle. There was only a dull, cold pain that had taken root deep within my soul. A pain that had no name, no words to describe it. And it was silently, steadily, eating me away from the inside. I no longer had the strength to watch the rest of that video. My hands were trembling as I gently placed the iPad back on the bedside table. I was afraid to even touch the screen again. I turned my face toward the wall and pulled the thin hospital blanket up to my chest. As if I were trying to hide from the entire world, I quietly closed my eyes. The hospital's PA system crackled to life, announcing the change of the nursing shifts. Out in the hallway, I could hear the soft, hurried footsteps of the nurses moving back and forth, the gentle whirring sound of a bed's casters gliding across the polished floor. From the room next to mine, I could hear the voices of what sounded like a family. A calm, middle-aged man was speaking. "Mom, what do you feel like for dinner tonight?" he asked gently. "How about I bring you some of that chicken noodle soup from the deli? Do you think you could eat some?" Hearing his voice, my chest tightened. It wasn't jealousy. It was nostalgia. I remembered a time, long ago, when I was just like that man, making soup for my own mother and carrying it to her in the hospital. Back then, I believed with all my heart. I believed that one day, my daughter would do the same for me. It didn't have to be anything grand. For instance, a single phone call would have been enough. "Mom, you're in the hospital? Are you okay?" Just those few words. That's all I would have needed. But what I received in reality was unanswered text messages and a video of my own daughter mocking me. A video that had been viewed thousands of times and liked by hundreds of people. Slowly, I turned my head to the right. On the small bedside table sat a plastic vase with a few wilted, artificial flowers stuck inside it. Next to it was the hospital dinner tray, the food left completely untouched. A cup of cold, greasy broth. A bowl of thin, watery oatmeal. But the most tasteless thing in that room was the human heart. From my purse, I took out a small wooden comb and began to run it through my hair. As I watched the strands of white hair fall one by one onto the stark white pillow, I felt as if my own old age was silently, invisibly, spilling away, without anyone ever noticing. Inside my purse, there was a birthday card I hadn't sent yet. I had been getting it ready to mail next month, along with a short letter to my daughter and a small gift. A pair of small, silver earrings. An old friend of mine, a jeweler, had made them by hand and engraved my daughter's name on them. All this time I had kept telling myself, she's probably just busy, that's all. Sooner or later, she'll start calling again, just like she used to. But today, I finally understood. It wasn't that she was forgetting, it was that there was simply no place left for a mother in my daughter's life. Just then, the night nurse came into my room. She was a small young woman, maybe 25 years old, and her voice was as soft and gentle as a spring breeze. As she adjusted my IV drip, she spoke to me quietly. "Don't push yourself too hard. If you get plenty of rest, you should be back on your feet in about a week. If you need anything at all, just press the call button, okay?" I gave her a small nod. Before she left, she turned back with a smile and asked, "Is any of your family coming to visit? If you'd like, I can give them a call for you." I managed a weak, gentle smile in return. "That's all right. We live a little, far apart." I didn't mean far in terms of miles on a map. I meant the distance between our hearts. A distance that was now too great for my hands to ever reach across. I gazed out the window. The lights of New York City glittered brightly against the night sky, as they always did, but inside my heart, a long, cold darkness was quietly beginning to spread. And that night, for the very first time, a thought came to me. If I were to leave this world one day, would anyone even notice? Would anyone call and ask, "Mom, where are you?" And in that moment, I finally understood. I understood that love, when it is given and given in only one direction, it is not family. It is nothing more than an illusion, held together by habit. It was April. In the small park near my apartment, most of the dogwood petals had already fallen, and only a few lonely blossoms were left, fluttering in the wind along the path. After a week of treatment at the hospital, I had been discharged and was now back home. The bruises on my shoulder were slowly starting to fade, and my ankles still ached a little when I walked down the stairs, but, well, it was all right. When you get older, you learn to get used to living with a little pain. I opened the door to my small apartment, a place where no one ever came to visit. There were no voices to greet me, no smell of a warm meal cooking, no one to ask, "Mom, are you feeling better?" I took off my mask, hung my coat on the hook by the door, and sat down on the old wooden chair in the corner of the room. On the table lay the birthday card I had meant to send to my daughter. Beside it was a small, unopened package, a gift sent to me by an old friend who now lived in a nursing home. Today is my birthday. I am 76 years old. It wasn't that I was expecting anything, but still, somewhere in a corner of my heart, I had held on to a faint hope that I might receive just one short message from my daughter. Even just 2 words, "Happy birthday." But what I received was something else entirely. At 7:12 in the morning, a new message arrived. It was a single line of text. "Hey, what about this month's transfer? I'm in a hurry." There was no question mark, no, please, not even a thank you. It was a command, A short, cold, emotionless string of words. I stared at those words on the screen, and I felt something heavy, like a large stone, drop deep into the pit of my stomach. There was no concern for my hospital stay. There were no words to wish me a happy birthday. There was nothing. There was only the one thing there always was: a demand for money. I quietly placed my phone down on the table. For a long time, I just sat there, unable to move. With every steady tick of the wooden pendulum clock hanging on the wall, I could feel the threads of what I called endurance, the threads I had held onto for so long, begin to unravel inside me. One by one, they silently came undone. No tears fell. Perhaps I had already cried them all out. That afternoon, I'd put on a hat, slipped on a long-sleeve jacket, and walked slowly to the small bank branch nearby. A young teller I knew, a kind woman with a bright smile, greeted me as I walked in. "Mrs. Miller, good afternoon. Are you here to pay the electric bill today?" I offered her a calm smile in return. "No," I answered softly. "Today is for a different kind of payment." From my purse, I took out my checkbook and debit card and placed them on the reception counter. When the transaction was complete, the young teller spoke again, her voice low and professional. "All right, that's taken care of. As of this month, I have canceled the automatic transfer. This means that starting next month, no further funds will be sent from your account." I gave a small, simple nod. It was the slightest of movements, that nod, but it held within it all the resolve I had swallowed down for more than a decade. When I got home, I picked up my smartphone and took a screenshot of my checking. Account balance. Balance, $0. Japters Nietzsche. Of course, the money wasn't actually gone. I had simply moved the entire amount to a different bank account. A new place, one that nobody else knew about. That evening, I opened my laptop. On the new email screen, I calmly began to type. Subject: regarding your allowance. To Sarah, from this month forward, your mother is not an ATM. It is time for you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Attachment: image of zero balance. Ping. I didn't write anything else. There were no words of blame, no sentences filled with resentment, nothing. Because I knew now. I knew that words alone cannot break through a wall of coldness. And that is why I chose to end everything with a single line. It was my way of finally putting a stop to the mistaken kindness I had practiced for so many years, a period placed at the end of a long sentence by my own hand. After sending the email, I quietly opened a drawer in my old wooden dresser. Inside was an old notebook, one I hadn't touched in years. Its pages were filled with a meticulous record of every payment I had sent to my daughter over the past 12 years. April 2012, $800, first payment for college expenses. March 2015, plus 200, called to say she was short on rent. August 2017, continued payments after she said she wanted to quit her job. And then I turned to the very last page, and with a steady hand, I wrote a single line. April 2024, stopped. Just one word, followed by a period. For a long time, I just stared at that word. Stopped. It didn't just mean stopping the money transfers. It meant stopping the expectation. It meant I would no longer chase after something that didn't exist. I walked over to the refrigerator and took out the small vanilla cupcake I had bought at the bakery yesterday. I placed a single, small candle in the center of the frosting and then turned off all the lights in the room. In the soft, flickering glow, I whispered to myself, "Happy birthday, Evelyn. From now on, you're going to live for yourself." With those words, I took a gentle breath and blew out the flame. The room returned to its familiar silence. But deep inside my chest, I felt something shift, as if a great weight had finally been lifted. Like a heavy stone that had been pressing down on me for 12 long years had last been set down. I don't know how my daughter will react. And I don't need to know. Because today I finally said what needed to be said. I am not just a mother who gives. I am not an emotionless machine for wiring money. I am a person. I am a mother. And starting today, I will live for me. I sat by the window, looking out at the world. It was the morning after a long spring rain, and in my small, damp garden, the last of the dogwood petals were quietly drifting down to the ground. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees. It carried a chill that felt somehow tinged with sorrow, as if even the season of spring knew what it was to feel sad. A thought came to me, unbidden. If I were to just disappear right now, if I were to leave this place, to vanish from this quiet, unseen life I lead, who would even notice? Maybe an old friend from the senior center? Someone I used to share a cup of tea with? Or perhaps the young woman at the bank, the one who always offers me a polite, professional smile? And Sarah? My daughter? I'm sure she wouldn't notice until the next payment was due. Only then would she think, that's strange, and instinctively pick up the phone to call. But it wouldn't be a call made out of concern for me. The first words out of her mouth would surely be, "The money hasn't come through yet?" I almost laughed. No sound came out. Just a silent, trembling shudder deep inside my chest. I never imagined a day like this would come. I never imagined that I would one day become a mathematical formula. A simple calculation of X dollars per month. That I would cease to exist as a human being and become nothing more than a dollar amount. I stood up and walked into the bedroom. I opened the top drawer of my nightstand, where I've kept my most precious memories for so many years. The first letter Sarah sent me when she moved to her dorm in New York City. A small handkerchief she embroidered for me in elementary school, with the word "Mom" stitched in clumsy, uneven letters. And the photograph from that long-ago spring day, of the two of us smiling side by side under a sky full of blooming dogwood trees. I sat down on the edge of the bed and gently laid my hand on the old photograph. Was this what regret felt like? Was I mourning a warmth that had once been real? Or was I mourning the part of myself that had expected too much from someone, who was no longer there? I didn't know anymore. I only knew that once a person's heart closes, even memories become nothing more than decorations. They don't move. They don't answer back. They don't feel pain. They are just like a picture hanging in a frame on the wall. That night, before I went to sleep, I picked up the small notebook from my bedside table, and with a quiet sense of finality, I added one last entry. April 12th. Stop sending the money. Stop waiting. Stop treating kindness as an obligation. I closed the notebook and slid it under my pillow. And that night, I, for the first time in years, fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. I didn't have any nightmares. I didn't wake up in the middle of the night, over and over again. I didn't check my phone for a notification from the bank. I didn't wait for my daughter's name to appear on the screen. I just slept, like a person who had finally untied the knot that had bound her. For so long, like someone who had, with her own two hands, finally broken the chain. It was a quiet, deep, and ever so slightly freer kind of sleep. The message I had sent was nothing more than a single sentence and a screenshot of an empty bank account. It was a windless, quiet April evening. The time was 6:07 p.m. I didn't wait for a reply. I knew what was coming. I knew my daughter would read the message. And I knew, without a doubt, that she would call. Sure enough, at 7:05 p.m., the phone began to ring. The first missed call, then the second, the third, and, by the time 10:30 p.m. rolled around, the call log showed more than 15 missed calls. I turned my smartphone over, placing it face down on the desk. I wasn't angry, it was just that. I was tired. I was so very tired. I just couldn't bear to hear any more of it. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Thank you." And especially not, "I'm just so stressed right now." Or, "Things are really tight for me this month." I didn't want to hear any more of those words. Because, in all of those conversations, there had never once been the simple question, "Mom, how are you feeling?" The next morning, out of habit, I opened the social media app on my tablet. I went right to the page where I had seen that video, the one that had caused me so much pain. And there it was. A new post had just been published. It was from my daughter, Sarah. I can't believe my mom would do something like this. After sending me money for 12 years, she just cuts me off out of nowhere. I'm out here in New York trying so hard to survive, and my own mother has abandoned me. I'm just so disappointed. Underneath the text was a long line of emojis and a flood of comments. OMG. Why would your mom do that to you? Parents these days can be so cold, right? That's what the voices said, one after another. I read through them in silence. I didn't reply. I didn't react in any way. I just looked at the screen, quietly. But then, a few hours later, the entire atmosphere of the comments section began to change. An account I didn't recognize posted a single, sharp question. You're 26 years old. What are you doing still getting a monthly allowance from your mother? Then, another person chimed in. Your mom was literally in the hospital, and you didn't even go see her. And now you're on social media trying to shame her? Don't you feel embarrassed? Before long, the post was being shared by hundreds, then thousands of people. Someone even dug up her old video, the one where she had called her mother the ATM. The firestorm erupted all at once. I don't know who was the first to tag my daughter's employer in the comments. But by the next day, Sarah's entire account had been deleted. And then, an email arrived in the inbox of my old work account, the one I had when I was still a nurse. We are writing to apologize for the distress caused by the inappropriate conduct of one of our employees. The individual in question has been temporarily removed from her duties while we review the situation. I did not feel happy. I did not feel satisfied. There was only one thing I felt: sadness. It wasn't because my daughter was being criticized. It was the reality of it all. The reality that in this day and age, a conversation between a mother and her child could only be resolved through social media and the harsh glare of public opinion. That was what made me so incredibly sad. Around that time, I went quietly to the bank. I withdrew the entirety of my remaining savings, $22,000. I put a portion of it into a certificate of deposit at a different bank. The rest, I kept with me, in cash. From there, I took out my phone and called an old friend, Susan. She was a woman I had lived with in the same retirement community 3 years ago. Susan, I said, I was thinking of moving out your way. Is that little wooden cottage, the one by the creek, still available? It sure is, Evelyn. And what's more, the little bakery near me is looking for someone to help out. What do you think? Are you interested? I laughed, a real laugh. For the first time in what felt like ages. I can't bake bread, but I'm very good at measuring ingredients and washing dishes. On the other end of the line, I could hear Susan's warm, gentle chuckle. That's more than enough. No one here is going to call you an ATM. As long as you have someone who puts their heart into the work, the bread will always turn out just fine. 2. 3 days later, I was on a train heading north. All I brought with me was a small suitcase, a few changes of clothes, a new bank book, a handful of old photographs, and the notebook that held the record of 12 years of monthly payments. I didn't leave a letter for anyone. I didn't tell a soul where I was going, and I certainly didn't post anything on social media. In the notebook, I wrote only one final line. April 20th. Leaving the city. From now on, I will live for myself. The place I moved to was a tiny village nestled in the Catskill Mountains. A place with no shopping malls, no rumbling of subway cars, no dazzling, gleepless city lights. All that was here was the clean scent of pine trees and the gentle babbling of a small creek. And, in the afternoons, the soft, clear sound of wind chimes stirred by the breeze. My new home was a small, 3-room wooden cottage that sat just behind Susan's bakery. It had a moss-covered shingle roof, and under the eaves, a family of swallows had built their nest. My morning work was simple: open the shop, put on a pot of tea, wipe down the glass display case, and arrange the loaves of freshly baked bread. No one here called me Mom, and they certainly didn't call me VATM. But every single time I handed a loaf of bread to a customer, someone would. look me in the eye and say, "Thank you." One afternoon, a little girl came into the shop. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She had the clearest eyes, and she looked up at me and said, "Your grandma's bread smells so good. Aren't you tired?" With that one simple question, I felt like I was going to cry. It was just an ordinary, everyday phrase, but in all these long, long years, not a single person had ever thought to ask me that. I don't hate my daughter. And this was not an act of revenge. It was simply me, reclaiming my own humanity. Leaving was not the same as running away. It was me, finally, taking a single step out into the world, out of the birdcage I had locked myself inside, a cage called unconditional love. Those first few days in my new life, in the small village near the mountains, I still wasn't used to the sound of the morning wind moving through the trees. There were no car horns here, no hurried, anxious footsteps on the pavement, no notification sound from my banking app on the 15th of the month. The only sounds were the scuttling of a squirrel in the attic, the light tap of a sparrow's beak against the window pane, and the soft, quiet whisper of bread rising in the warmth of the oven. Every morning, I woke at 5, boiled water for green tea, and opened the shop with Susan. I didn't do anything special. I arranged the bread on the shelves, wiped down the little wooden tables, and exchanged a few words with the regular customers. But every one of those small, simple actions made me think, I am alive right now. Not for anyone else's sake. Not to be recognized or approved of by anyone. The people who came into the shop, they all left something behind. Sometimes it was a simple, "Thank you." Sometimes it was the kindness in their eyes as they offered a small smile. Or maybe just the quiet look of satisfaction on their face when I handed them a loaf of bread, still warm from the oven. They don't know that I used to be a nurse. No one asks if I have children, and I don't tell them. It felt like I was holding a fresh loaf of bread, still warm, close to my chest, without showing it to anyone. When the sun began to set, I would often sit on the small porch of the bakery, holding a cup of tea that had gone a little cool, and just gaze up at the sky. One day, an elderly woman from down the road was walking by, and she paused and said to me, quietly, "You have the face of someone who has known a great deal of sadness. But now, you look peaceful." I only smiled. I didn't say anything in reply. Because it was true. My heart was calm. I hadn't forgiven anyone. But I was no longer waiting for an apology. And that alone was more than enough. I know that what happened back in New York City is not completely over yet. It's not as if my daughter's heart had changed, nor had anything between us been mended. And someday, I know she will come here. Not out of nostalgia, and not because she was thinking of her mother, but simply because she would think, I don't know where else to go. She would find herself with nowhere left to turn, and only then, as a very last resort, would she come looking for me? I understand that too. But even when that day comes, I will not run away anymore. Because now, finally, I have learned how to say it. The one phrase I couldn't learn my entire life. The one that was, in truth, the most important of all. Your mother has played her part. From now on, you must write your own life story by yourself. June in the Catskills. In this little village, a light rain often falls in the early morning. A soft mist drifted slowly between the pine and maple trees, dyeing the tranquil scenery in a muted, hazy silver. I was sitting on the simple wooden bench in front of the bakery, cradling a warm mug of chamomile tea in both hands. Today was Monday, the quietest day of the week, with the fewest customers. Because of that, there was nothing to rush. I had just finished wiping down the counter and was about to start on the ledger for next week's ingredient costs when Susan poked her head out from the kitchen in the back. Her eyes held a look of gentle uncertainty. "There's a young woman here to see you. Says she came all the way from New York City." She said your name, Evelyn." I stopped what I was doing, my hand hovering over the open ledger. I didn't need to hear another word. I already knew who it was. I rose slowly from my stool, my movements deliberate. The soft scuff of my simple clogs echoed, tap, tap. on the old wooden floorboards as I walked toward the entrance. And there, just as I had expected, was the scene I had long imagined. My daughter was standing in front of the old, weathered wicker fence. She was thinner, somehow smaller than I remembered. Her hair was pulled back into a single, plain ponytail, and her face, free of any makeup, was pale and drawn. The confident, almost arrogant woman who had spoken so boldly on her social media videos was gone. There was no trace of her here. There was only a young woman with lost, bewildered eyes, clutching the handle of her worn handbag as if it were a lifeline. Our eyes met. But for a long moment, neither of us could find the words. The silence stretched out between us, heavy and damp like the morning air. It was I who couldn't bear it any longer. "Why did you come all this way, looking for your mother?" Sarah bit her lip. I could see a faint tremor run through her. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I was wrong. I lost my job. And my friends? They've all started keeping their distance. I never thought it would turn out like this." I remained silent. The faint, sweet scent of chamomile from my mug drifted on the breeze. I kept my grip on the warm ceramic, not taking a step closer, but not taking a step back either. Sarah looked down at the gravel path, and then, as if squeezing the words from the deepest part of her, she continued, "I'm not asking for money. I just want you to forgive me. Please, just give me one more chance. Is that too much to ask?" Those words, they seeped into my heart, as quiet and persistent as the light rain dripping from the eaves. And then, I spoke slowly, my voice even and calm. "If you had truly needed your mother, you would have come much sooner. But if it's money you're after, well, your mother has nothing left to give." Sarah's head snapped up. Her eyes filled with tears, which finally overflowed and traced shimmering paths down her pale cheeks. "How can you say something so cold? The mother I remember, she was so much kinder than this. Why you like this now?" I was not trying to punish her. I wasn't trying to make her suffer, but I had no intention of ever returning to being her shadow. I placed my hand on the wooden frame of the screen door, my voice steady and quiet when I spoke again. "Forgiveness is something I might be able to give. But trust isn't like a wire transfer from an ATM. You can't just cut it off and then press a button to make it start again. I don't hate you, Sarah, but I have stopped expecting things from you. It's like the autumn leaves. Once they have fallen, they can never return to the branch." A small, choked sob escaped my daughter's lips, and she began to cry in earnest. A quiet, trembling sound. I did not move from where I stood. I didn't open the door. I didn't rush to her side. I didn't reject her, but I didn't welcome her in either. If I were to open this door right now, I knew I would go right back to being the understanding mother. I would forgive everything, without her ever truly knowing the meaning of an apology. And that is why I kept it closed. After some time, my daughter slowly turned her back and began to walk away, out beyond the wicker fence. I did not watch her go. I simply, quietly, sat back down on the bench in front of the shop. A sliver of sunlight began to break through the clouds, its gentle rays illuminating the small pot of lavender I kept by the entrance. I brought the mug to my lips and took a sip of my tea. It was completely cold now. But strangely, it didn't taste bitter at all. That evening, Susan came to me and asked softly, "You didn't forgive her, did you?" I shook my head slowly. "That's not it. I just haven't forgotten." But you still love her, don't you? Your daughter?" I managed a small, tired smile and answered. "A mother's love doesn't just disappear. I've just put it away, in a drawer, in the very back. I will always be her mother. That will never change. But this place, it is no longer a place for me to be tested." That night, I took out the old notebook, the one where I had recorded 12 years of payments, and on the final page, I added one more line. June 14th, my daughter came to visit. I did not open the door, but the door to my heart. It opened so that it could finally close. I closed the notebook and placed it on the wooden shelf next to the bread oven. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a soft and steady rhythm against the roof. But I knew that tomorrow the morning would come again. I would wake up at 5, boil the water, make my tea, and open the shop. I no longer needed the sound of a ringing phone or the notification of a completed transfer. And I no longer needed to hear the word mom, a word that was only ever spoken when money was required. I am living my life alongside warm bread and with a heart that no longer expects anything. After my daughter left, the small wooden gate at the edge of the property swung in the breeze and clicked softly shut. The sound it made was tiny, almost insignificant. And yet, in my heart, it resonated with absolute clarity, like the final, quiet closing of a chapter in my life. Where she will go from here, I do not know. I did not ask, because I understand now that there are journeys in this world that one must walk alone. And on that road, her mother will no longer be waiting at the final station. That afternoon, the rain began again. It wasn't a hard driving rain, but a quiet, fine, and gentle mist that fell without end. A rain that seemed to be a perfect reflection of what was in my own heart. I sat there on the bakery bench, watching the drops fall one by one from the edge of the awning. They traced their way down the roof and disappeared into a small drain pipe. The air was filled with the smell of damp earth, mixed with the faint, comforting aroma of fresh breadcrumbs. And while that scent helped to lighten my spirit, just a little, deep inside my chest, a hollow space still remained, quiet and empty. I kept remembering the look in my daughter's eyes just as she turned to leave. There was no anger there, no excuses, not anymore. But still, there was something in her eyes, the look of someone who has missed the last bus out of town for the night, a lost, anxious gaze, with no destination in sight. I don't blame that girl. But I don't think of myself as cold either, because I know that out of all the kinds of love in this world, a mother's love in particular is a strange and complicated thing. And I know that forgiving someone does not mean erasing everything and putting it all back the way it was before. When something has been broken, you can try to mend it, but you can never make the cracks disappear completely. And I have made a choice. I chose to spend the rest of my life standing next to the wall that is still whole, the one without any cracks, instead of trying to repair the one that was damaged. As evening fell, I went about my usual routine, tidying up the small room in the back of the bakery. I folded my bedding and laid out the new electric blanket that Susan had given me. I looked around at the walls. There are no family photographs here, no old letters pinned to a corkboard. There is only a small potted plant, a few well-worn paperback books on a shelf, and, hanging by the window, a small, framed piece of needlepoint. Just 3 simple words: live for yourself. I stood there for a long time, just looking at those words, not as a piece of philosophy, but as a quiet acknowledgement of the person I had finally become. A person who was at last able to put those words into practice. For more than 70 years, living for someone else had been the most natural thing in the world to me. It was my default, my only setting. And now, at long last, I was able to make the choice to live for myself. In that quiet moment, it dawned on me. I am alone, it's true, but I am not lonely. Unlike those years when I could only feel my own existence by being needed by someone else, now, today, I am standing in a place where I can affirm my own worth without depending on anyone. And that was more than enough. It was everything. I used to believe something with all my heart. I believed that a mother remains a mother no matter what. Even if she is hurt, even if she is forgotten. A mother is the place her child can always come home to. Or so I thought. But now, at 76 years old, I have finally come to understand. I understand that even in motherhood, there are times when you need the courage to simply stand still. That doesn't mean you stop loving. It just means you leave a small space inside yourself, just a tiny corner, that is for you and you alone. I have been on a very long journey, From my days as a young nurse working in the bustling heart of New York City, to the years as a single mother, scraping together every penny for my daughter's tuition, I was the woman who stood in line for hours at the post office, clutching money orders. And somewhere along the way, in my daughter's eyes, I had become nothing more than a living ATM. And now, at the very end of that long road, here I am. An old woman, quietly running a bakery in a small village. Every morning, I drink my tea and open the shop. And I no longer wait for messages from anyone. The rainy early summer in the Catskills passed in the blink of an eye. The trees and bushes grew impossibly green and lush. The pastries sold well. The small bakery that Susan and I run isn't famous by any means, but anyone who comes once always comes back a second time. One customer said to me, "There's something about the bread here, it tastes different. It's light, but it's so incredibly warm." I just smile when I hear that, because I know that warmth doesn't come from the oven. It comes from my heart, a heart that can no longer be broken. Sometimes, I still think about my daughter. You can't just erase memories. That's not how they work. All you can do is tuck them away in a drawer deep inside your chest and lock it with a key called acceptance. Where my daughter is now, what she is doing, I have no idea. I don't know if she still resents me, but I don't need to know, because I've learned that forgiveness, it isn't for the other person. It's for you. It is the act of setting down a heavy stone so that you can keep on walking. I have forgiven her. But I have not opened the door again. Because a door that has been closed by a breach of trust, it is not meant for people to pass through again. It is enough for a little gentle sunlight to shine through the cracks. That evening, a high school boy came into the shop. He politely ordered 2 brownies and a small tin of shortbread cookies. As I was bagging them for him, he suddenly looked at me and asked, "Grandma, how come you don't use a smartphone? Aren't you scared of being left behind by the times?" I laughed and answered him. A long time ago, I used to live in a place where everyone was staring at a screen, but nobody was really looking at each other. Now I'm here. And even without a smartphone, I don't feel disconnected from anyone. Real people, you see, they're not on the other side of a Wi-Fi signal. They're the ones standing right here, in front of you. He nodded and smiled. But I'm sure it will be a few more years before he truly understands what I meant. That night, I went back to my room and lit a small candle in front of the photograph of my husband. It's not that I believe in spirits or anything like that. There are pieces of a life that you can't tell anyone, and for those, all you can do is close your eyes and speak them quietly to the ones who have passed on. I spoke softly to him. "It's all right now. I don't have to break my heart over someone else anymore, and I don't have to keep trying so hard to be a good mother's, not anymore." The thin trail of smoke from the candle rose silently toward the ceiling. It rose so lightly. Just like me. Tomorrow is Sunday. The shop is closed. I think I'll walk down to the creek and read an old book. Maybe that Mary Oliver collection I've read a dozen times? Or perhaps that worn-out Steinbeck paperback I loved so much when I was young. I don't think about what if anymore, because life doesn't come with a rewind button. This moment, right now, is the only thing I can hold firmly in my own 2 hands. And if you were to ask me, after everything that has happened, do you still hope for your daughter's return? I would tell you this. I hope with all my heart that my daughter lives a happy life. But she doesn't need to come back. No, she doesn't. This is what I hope for now. I hope that my daughter will one day realize it on her own. That love is not something you are automatically entitled to from the moment you are born, and that a parent is not an unlimited debit card. This is what I hope for. That one day, a time will come when my daughter says, "Thank you." Not because she wants something from me, but simply because she remembers the fact that once upon a time, her mother gave everything she had for her. People often say, a parent forgives everything, but they don't forget everything. I now know the meaning of those words deep in my bones. And if you, the person who has read this story all the way to the end, still have a parent who is alive. Please don't forget. A text message with no emotion, or a wire transfer that arrives on the same day every month. That is not what the relationship between a parent and child is supposed to be. A parent is not a withdrawal slip. They were once the only place in the world where you could withdraw love, endlessly, and without question. How old are you now? When was the last time you picked up the phone just to ask, "Mom, what did you eat today?" If you'd like, you can leave your answer in the comments below. And so, for anyone who might be unknowingly leaving someone behind right now, please, share this story with them, gently. Because somewhere, you can be sure they exist. The person who stayed awake through the night, just for you. The person who handed over every last penny of their savings, just for you. And the one who, simply, wished for nothing more than your happiness, praying for it with their entire heart. Even now, they are still there, quietly.